Welcome to Vision to Value, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on how technology is planned, purchased, and implemented in state, government, health, and human services agencies. Each episode explores the real challenges of transformation, from procurement pitfalls to leadership strategies, and provides bold insights to drive meaningful change. Your hosts, Carole Hussey and Tony Mathews, bring decades of experience from both public and private sector leadership. Together, Carole and Tony bring unfiltered insights and straight talk on what works, what doesn't, and how agencies and vendors can turn vision into real value. Now let's get started. We are honored to welcome Paul Epp of Foster Care Technologies as our guest. Paul Epp is the co-founder of Foster Care Technologies, a SaaS company that he led from startup to acquisition. He works with a variety of technology companies on commercialization strategies and AI adoption, focusing on LLM-based chatbot strategies and implementations.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Vision to Value, our podcast where we talk about all things transformation in health and human services. You'll notice today we have a special guest with us. Tony and I have been wanting to do this episode for some time, and so we're very excited to have with us today my longtime industry friend and colleague, Paul Epp. He is here to help us introduce AI and to talk about practical applications for that. And Tony, of course, will always bring his leadership hat to the table, and we'll weave that in as well. But before we get started, Paul, why don't you give an introduction about your background in human services and your particular interest in technology?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Carole, Tony. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about technology, as it's very near and dear to my heart and is really the promise of the future in a very real way to me. I got my start in 2014. I was the co-founder of a company called Foster Care Technologies, and we commercialized and developed an application that was used for matching children with families in the foster care system. And then we later expanded it to include adoption matching. And we developed another product alongside that, a mobile product that allowed families to participate in that matching process. It was a research-backed, algorithm-driven software product. About 2.5 years ago, we became part of a large social services agency called TFI Family Services and continued to provide that product through them and worked with the staff there on a number of initiatives, including an AI work group that I created and ran for a while there. And I helped them with their AI policy and spent a lot of time looking at AI solutions and just learning about how the technology can be applied to different social services and human services applications. And then a couple of months ago, I started Epp Technology Ventures, which is my company that consults with companies that provides commercialization services and AI consulting, and work with a couple of technology groups that help provide chatbots and implementing those for organizations that are based on AI, of course. And so I'm just really interested in AI, how it can help human services. I take a very human first AI approach, which I will go into more, which is effectively that AI can be a tool for training us in a number of ways as we prepare to get ready for some of these other technologies that are coming our way, but really focusing on how it can develop us as people to do our jobs better rather than replacing what we do. It's the better way.
Yeah, I love that. And that's why we were so excited to have you today too, because there's a whole lot of talk out there right now about products. And Tony and I are big believers that, people like us should be advising states and localities and how to, effectively use these tools and mitigate risk and all that. And so with that in mind, Tony, before we start introducing some of these topics and provide some context for our discussion today, as a former leader in a government agency, and this is by far, well, it's the second biggest big thing in my career, technology wise. This is how old I am. The first was when the internet really became popular. So this is pretty cool. I'm very into AI. I love it. So Tony, from your vantage point as a leader of a state government agency, how would you feel about embracing this cool new thing that is moving so quickly?
Well, I think there's two different leaders in state and local government when it comes to this AI. One is resistance, and they're afraid of all the what ifs and the uncertainties, and they just want to ride it out, doing things the way they've done things because it's too scary. The other side is a little more progressive. Folks that are like, okay, I really want to embrace this. I've only seen the tip of the iceberg on what's possible with AI, but don't know how that relates to the nature of the work that we do. And so the progressive folks want to understand it better before they get in bed with AI. And that comes down to a couple things. One is being able to sort of advocate for the expenditure with the legislature or the feds by being able to sort of have a return on investment. We're going to drop X amount on AI, but it's going to save us Y, right, in the foreseeable future. You've got to be able to document that in order to pay for it. The other thing is, we're very conservative when it comes to risk in government, right? So I think the other sort of scary part of this for leaders is around the safety and security of it, right? We don't want things out on the cloud that we think are going to be hacked or shared with the general public because we have to be really good stewards of the information that we're using. So I think that's the other piece of it. If you have internal processes that that don't include HIPAA or any sort of PHI, then that's one thing, right? But when you start trying to leverage AI to do some sort of eligibility determination and that sort of thing, then you've really got to feel 100% confident that you're protected and insulated from any sort of outside threat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all fair. And I think when people start thinking about AI, they immediately jump to those sort of big ticket items where they want to apply it, right? Today, we're going to talk a bit about some of the more tactical, applications. People are using it. It's available to them. Let's figure out how to support our workers and use it in a low risk and yet effective way. And I do appreciate that you brought up the measures, Tony, because we are seeing and hearing more and more about that from federal leaders. I was at the Medicaid conference earlier this week, and that came up, right? Measures and metrics. How do we justify the expense, and how do we quantify this ROI? So that's something we've talked about previously podcasts. We won't get into that too much today. But we really want to talk today more about like the accessible ways in which you can use AI today. This is going to be a multi-part series. So we're going to get through as much as we can today. And then we're going to have another session, and we'll probably have another and another because AI is AI. But so what we really want to do today, and for those of you who have a little bit more knowledge of AI, this part might be a little slow for you, and you can feel free to fast forward, if you will, through some of this, but please come back. So Paul is going to start by giving us a little bit of a primer about AI and what it is, just to make sure that everybody's sort of on the same page. So Paul, do you want to kind of just bring folks up to speed and give them the lay of the land with AI?
Absolutely. And I loved what you said about the internet, Carole. The internet in the 90s, let's say late 90s, people didn't know what to do with it. You will go back and see, if you care to do so, that people were skeptical. They said, people are never going to use this. It's not going to do anything. What would I do with this? And I can't tell you how similarly I feel about that time. I was a younger person at that point, and this time, because they are saying exactly the same things. And if you are a student of technology, as I am, you will see this pattern over and over again when a new technology is introduced. I feel like we're on the verge of having the explosion of the internet that we saw, late 90s, 2000s. And now you think about the internet and it is like the fish in water. What do you mean? What's the internet? Like, it's so ingrained into what we do. and the work that we do day to day that we don't even notice it anymore. I think that's what's going to happen with AI. And there are a number of ways that I see that happening. But my goal right now in the near term is to take these technologies. I don't develop them myself. We have lots of people working on that, as you know. Some of them are billion-dollar tech companies. Some of them are people in their basements. But my job is to help interpret these things, figure out what they are, how they can be used, because it's going to take all of us to figure this out. And when we make that transition from what's the internet, what am I ever going to use that for, to, oh yeah, obviously it's a part of our daily life, not just work life, but personal life. I want to be there for that transition, and I can help give some definition to what we mean when we say AI is here. And so that's what I like. That's where I like to start. And if you don't mind, Carole, pulling up this slide just to give us a quick, this is a slide that I use to sort of frame the discussion. Because we want to start with what is it? Because AI is a buzzword right now. It gets attention in the news. It is actually many different things. And the more specificity that we can give to what we're talking about in each case, the more quickly we can have these discussions, the more quickly we can dispel these fears that you're talking about, Tony, the more quickly we can know what's going on and know that we're talking about the same thing, which is always the challenge in technology. In my 10 plus years working in this field, we want to make sure we are talking about the same thing. So what is AI? AI at its fundamental level is really just computers imitating humans. That's why we call it intelligence. We call it artificial because these are computers. It is essentially pattern recognition. Computers can do this very, very quickly. They can do it automatically. They can be programmed to do so. AI is really the conversion of software technology and big data that we've been gathering now for decades. And it is basically just having computers acting like humans. And there are three main categories that I want us to consider when we're talking about AI. And I think this will help frame the discussion that we're going to have today. And they contain a lot of the buzzwords that we're hearing in the media, from technology companies talking about their solutions, etc. The first is machine learning. Machine learning is really just a method of training computers to recognize patterns. And so you'll hear deep learning, you'll hear supervised and unsupervised learning, you'll hear reinforcement learning. These are all versions of machine learning. And very smart tech people, computer programmers, software developers, engineers, they are using those processes under that heading. They are different types of machine learning. And they're using those processes to build models, which is another buzzword that you'll hear. You'll hear some of these companies, Anthropic, OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, now Facebook, all of these companies, you'll hear them talk about models. And basically you use machine learning to create these models. And the models are basically just mathematical descriptions of lots and lots of data that we can use to do something. So you might have a vision model. You might have a model that can recognize speech and audio. If you know the Shazam app, I don't know if people still use that anymore, but it's built into the Apple devices now. It recognizes a song based on just listening to the song, having the app listen to a song. That's using an AI model below it to do this action. Forecasting, generative AI. Generative models, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about those today and in future sessions. That's where the large language models come in. And of course, a large language model is another buzzword you will hear. And of course, it is a type of AI model. And then, so you use machine learning to build these models. And then when you have these models, you can develop what I call processes or services. And this is where we will see products in the marketplace. We already do see them. Generative AI, natural language processing, optical character recognition. At Foster Care Technologies, we implemented optical character recognition already a few years ago, before we started hearing about AI in the news every day. That relies on an AI model, and it learns to read text and turns it into text that then you can then use in all sorts of different ways. Predictive analytics, computer vision, programming robots. So these are all things that we do once we have these models. And that first one, generative AI, sometimes called Gen AI, is where we start to talk about large language models. And large language models are what live underneath a lot of these services that we're hearing about. Most of them are chatbots. You'll hear me talk about chatbots over and over again today. These are things like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Claude from Anthropic, Llama from Facebook, Grok from X AI. All of these are different types of chatbots, but they live on top of large language models, and they are useful because of these models. And just a final point here, when you hear about the billions and billions of dollars that these large companies are spending on building data centers, having their own power sources, all of this stuff, these capital expenditures are because they need basically many, many, many servers to train these models. So creating these models is where we've seen so much investment recently. And those are the foundation of all of these products that we're seeing. So I just wanted to give that overview. This is how I think about AI, and this should help you and our audience understand, what are we talking about when we talk about AI? Are we talking about one of the processes? Are we talking about the model underneath? Are we talking about building the model? Which part do I have to do? Which part's relevant to me, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's super helpful. The interesting thing too is these things are not all new. Some of these things have been around for many years, and so they're much more mature. So when we hear about, folks getting concerned about AI being built into their products, and it's built into many things and has been for a long time. I remember when predictive AI first got really popular, and a lot of, particularly in child welfare, people were very against that for a lot of valid reasons, and still concerned about that. And the same is true with Gen AI, right? Like, it's new. There are some ways in which it could be used that might harm, people, especially in human services programs, where we know a lot of bias already exists and can be perpetuated. And so that's why we wanted to provide some context today about some of this too, as we start to think about the ways in which we might use AI for good. And that's why we're particularly focused on the people today and the workforce, and the challenges that we know that we have within state government agencies in particular. Tony, what's your reaction to the information that Paul just shared? You've had the luxury of sitting on both sides of the tech fence and the state leader fence. So what are your thoughts on that? Oh, you're on mute, Tony.
Okay, I'm
There
unmuted. You're talking about the people part of it, and I think that's an overlooked part when you're talking about adoption of technology. The people that you want to implement this have to see the value to them. So I definitely think that's a big part of it, is making sure that you don't lose sight of the change management part of this, and making sure that the people that you expect to utilize these tools understand the why and they're included sort of in the journey, right? So people, I think it starts there. As a leader, as Paul was talking, I was thinking about three things. I was thinking about prerequisites. Like I need to understand. It's three things. One is sort of what's possible. Get me excited about all the different sort of day-to-day practical uses for AI. Get me excited about it. Then let's talk about the prerequisites I would need to be able to leverage some of these tools, right? It's data governance, right? It's having clean data. It's having, the right, bandwidth, in your server farm or wherever you're keeping your computation work going on. So that's the second piece is what are the prerequisites to actually be able to leverage this? And then I think the third thing goes back to the being able to sort of quantify the value of it so I can sell it to the people I need to sell it to. So
Yeah.
prerequisites, the power of what's possible, and then being able to measure the difference it would make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So, Paul, what would you say to that? How would you get Tony excited about this?
There are a couple of different things. The first one, as I'm famous for doing, is to separate again and categorize the two types of AI that we might that you might see, Tony, as a leader of a human services organization. One is going to be the type of AI that you might build into your products, into the systems that you're using. As an administrator, leader of an organization, one of your primary jobs is going to be to set up systems that work well for your staff. And that's where we see the vendors offering these products that are based on AI. You might hire an AI contracting firm to build something specific, but this is basically software, software tools that your workforce is going to use. Then we have this other category, which is these chatbots that are based on large language models that are freely available already today. And they're accessible to everyone who has an internet connection. And they are here to stay. And they are going to be used either officially or unofficially by staff. Which is to say, you can put all of the policies in place that you want and you should. And this is something that I helped the last organization I worked with to figure out, what do we tell staff about these things? It's this new thing that everybody knows about, but we don't want to talk about it sometimes at the administrative level. So the first thing I would tell an administrator like you, Tony, is to say, we have an AI strategy. AI is about exploring these products, and AI in that sense is going to mean looking at products that have AI embedded into it. And it could be anything. And frankly, it could be taking a look at existing products that you use already, and you'll start to see AI show up in those, and you say, what do we do with it? So looking at systems that you use for your staff, that you provide as tools, and saying, what is AI going to do for us? And some of those things would be predictive analytics, forecasting what sorts of needs we're going to meet for the populations that we're serving in human services. It could be AI, if you go back to my other slide about thinking about different types of AI that can understand speech. And they can record speech, and then they can turn it into text, and then they can interpret it. In social services, human services, a huge part of the work is just documenting English language and then figuring out what to do with it and where it goes. And AI can read things instantly and interpret and pull things out. And some words are just more important than others. And these systems that you set up will have these types of tools embedded in them. The best thing that you can do is to be very careful about what they are and what they're doing. And to say, this tool does this, and we're going to use it as a staff for this. And then you work with the product, whoever's implementing it, to make sure that you understand what it's doing and it's just using it for this use. There are overblown promises made about what AI can do. Those may very well be coming, but as an administrator, I'm going to be more interested in what's coming tomorrow or today. What can we do with it today or next month? And so to be aware of those things. Then the other piece is the large language model chatbots is, I believe you don't want to disincentivize your staff. You don't want to dissuade them from using these things. You want to instead be very clear about how they can be used and how they cannot be used. And it's fine to say, we don't use ChatGPT or we don't use Claude for official business. You can also provide limited uses. You can, some organizations will provide access to these tools, but you want to be very clear about how they should be used, and you want to come up with a plan for educating your staff about what they do and how they might be used, rather than letting them just go crazy and explore on their own and think, oh, because they're going to come up with ideas about how this would make work faster, more effective, etc. And you want them to, but you want to get ahead of it and say, here's what they're good for. Here's how you ought to use them.
You're on mute.
That sort of circles back to something else we've talked about previously about understanding the why. You can just tell people don't use ChatGPT, right? That's, we're using this instead. If you don't explain why we're not using ChatGPT, then they're gonna use it because they're familiar with it and it's easier. But if you explain the security risks or what happens to the information that you plug into it and how it's utilized other places, then whether they like it or not, they're more likely to implement your edict because they understand, oh, okay, it's a security situation. It's not just, Tony's not getting a kickback for using another tool. It's a legitimate reason why we shouldn't be using that one, right? So I think that goes back to good training and having people understand why we're making the decisions we are.
And to drive home the point, if I may, Tony, that these are tools to be used to amplify people's ability to have an impact. Particularly in human services, you want to get the technology out of the way and get the people in front doing the work that only a person can do. Lots of other industries you'll see, we don't really need a person to, monitor this transaction that's going through the web or whatever it may be. But someone going into a home, someone talking to a person trying to get benefits for something, you need a human touch there. It does matter. And the AI needs to be a tool that can free you up to do more of that human work that only a human can do.
Yeah, all very true. And, we keep coming back to the human part of this, which is something that I think gets left out of a lot of AI conversations. And so I appreciate that. Even the idea of work with your staff and let them help identify the places in which you can safely use the tools that are already available. We often talk in this podcast about, projects shouldn't take 5 years and cost $100 million. There are things we can do today, and using these accessible AI tools is one of them. And if your staff feel empowered and encouraged to use them, and they know the constraints in which they should use them, they're going to feel empowered, and they're going to probably be much more creative about how we apply the use of these tools than perhaps any of us would be. So with that, I'm gonna close us out on this episode because we're already at time. But as I promised at the beginning, we are going to have a second follow up to this. We like to make sure that we keep these sessions at around 30 minutes because we feel like that's a good amount of time for a podcast. So this has been really that introductory piece of AI. And we're going to come back in our second segment and we're going to dig into some real tips for using AI in practice. The AI that's accessible to you today, not the build it into your case management system, longer, bigger applications, but what can you be doing today? And in that episode, we're also going to give you some homework and some things to think about in terms of risk and strategy. So thanks, Paul, for coming today. We greatly appreciate that. I know you're going to be in our next segment. And of course, Tony, always thank you. And to our audience, please do follow us on YouTube. That way you get the notifications of every episode that comes out. And we look forward to seeing you in our next episode following up on this AI discussion. Thanks so much, everyone.